So I want to extend a huge warm welcome to you. And of course, I want to extend a special welcome to the representatives of MINEMA and UNHCR. Under their leadership and coordination, Rwanda is demonstrating a thoughtful approach to ensuring the safety and future of refugees, as well as host communities. In Rwanda's country refugee response plan, it identifies objectives meant to graduate those that we serve from dependency to self-reliance. And it's for this purpose that we're gathered today to talk about the KUHI Consortium. The KUHI Consortium was formed with the support of GSMA, an organization working with strategic partners in Rwanda to leverage the use of mobile technology and digital response to increase the quality and efficiency of humanitarian response and development initiatives. I want to extend a special appreciation to GSMA for enabling this effort to move forward. I also want to share with you the wonderful pleasure it has been to work together with others to bring the specialists and learners from various agencies that are part of this consortium. The KUHI Consortium is made up of ALIGHT, welcome Bernard, that many of you know formally as ARC, Give Directly, and UNCDF, as well as World Vision. Our aim was to increase the digital financial inclusion and contribution to improving the economic lives of refugees and host communities of Rwanda. We also want to extend a special thanks to the Research Hub for leading the research process on the ground. The assessment, whose report we're launching today, was conducted in host communities and refugee camps to assess the digital financial inclusion landscape. We aim to identify where there's potential for initiatives to promote and increase uptake of services. This includes answering questions around what financial inclusion models currently target refugees. What's the extent of the mobile phone penetration, financial literacy levels, and availability of digital financial services, as well as the current livelihood opportunities for refugees. We'll summarize some of these key findings during today's presentation, and a copy of the report will be shared with all of you right after the meeting. You're in for a treat. I think we're all going to be learning a lot. Following our key speakers and the presentation of findings, we'll invite you to participate in a question and answer session with an expert panel. Since this research was conducted, COVID-19 has greatly affected everyone's lives, and so part of the discussion will focus on asking our expert what the digital economy and digital finance looks like in the midst of a pandemic. To get us started today, we're delighted to have representatives of MINEMA and UNHCR with us, who will be speaking about the broader strategy and vision of socio and economic inclusion for refugees in Rwanda. It's my pleasure to hand over to the distinguished UNHCR representative, Mr. Ahmed Babafal. Welcome.
Thank you, Thin. Good morning, colleagues. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Thank you. Dear participants, representatives from MINEMA, development partners, and UN agencies, NGOs, financial sectors, the KUHI Consortium members, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNHCR Rwanda, I would like to share our greetings with you all and welcome you to this important webinar. I would also like to congratulate the study team, the consortium members, ALIGHT, World Vision, UNCDF, and Give Directly, and GSMA members for doing this assessment of financial inclusion landscape with a focus on digital financial services in the context of refugees and their neighboring host communities in Rwanda. I'm glad to be joining you in this launch event. UNHCR is working closely with MINEMA and partners towards enhanced socioeconomic inclusion of refugees and their host communities so that they have thriving and dignified lives and livelihoods. The government of Rwanda's commitment to this initiative is evident by the fact that they have signed up to the Global Compact on Refugees, popularly known as the CRRF. Development of a strategic plan for refugee inclusion, the government of Rwanda and UNHCR joint strategy on economic inclusion of refugees and host communities. The joint strategy outlines financial inclusion as one of its key pillars, alongside wage and self-employment and advocacy. Government of Rwanda has shown further commitment by supporting and implementing a number of large initiatives, including the rollout of the World Bank-supported socio-economic inclusion of refugees and host communities in Rwanda, called the Jambere project, which has also a financial inclusion component. We are also seeing strong steps of the government of Rwanda towards a cashless economy. UNHCR Rwanda is also coordinating with MINEMA implementation and monitoring of several socioeconomic inclusion projects and programs through a number of implementing and operational partners, NGOs, and UN agencies. As mentioned earlier, in most of the project, access to finance has been considered as an important aspect of self-reliance and livelihood. The UN in Rwanda has also signed UNDAP to the government of Rwanda, and the UNDAP takes an inclusive approach for refugee inclusion across sectors and thematic areas following the principle of leave no one behind agenda. As the economic impacts of COVID are seen across the globe, and in light of pressure on humanitarian budgets, supporting and facilitating refugee communities towards self-reliance is a shared aim. Uptake of digital financial services, including payment for goods, utility payments, savings, and loans is critical to achieving this aim. Mobile money services can play a significant part in this, particularly in low-income communities. This assessment reports that there is a strong potential to increase use of digital financial services, particularly using mobile phones, as many refugees and host communities have ownership of ordinary and smart mobile phones. The report also highlights the importance of saving groups, particularly through improvement of the Village Saving and Loan Association, VSLA's approach. UNHCR, MINEMA, and UNDP co-chairs a livelihood sector working group with participation from all relevant agencies, government, development partners, other UN agencies, NGOs, and financial sector. We encourage a coordinated approach between all partners and also to align their activities with the strategy on livelihoods and economic inclusion of refugees and host communities. This includes context-specific initiatives to scale up access to financial services. However, financial inclusion alone cannot achieve sustainable livelihood if not supplemented with policy initiatives, e.g., documentation, mobility, access to markets, right to work, etc., and other targeted interventions to enhance income. Therefore, it requires an integrated package of support based on the vulnerability of the target population and the local context. I believe the subsequent speakers will shed more light on the need for the scaled-up approach in an integrated manner to tackle multiple vulnerabilities of the refugees and host communities in Rwanda. Finally, I wish all the best to the KUHI Consortium members for convening this event and their efforts to enhance financial inclusion of refugees and host community. I thank you all. Murakoze cyane. Over to you, Sini.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate that, Representative. I believe we now will move to the presentation of the findings by Kundwani.
Yes, thank you, Sean, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you, our honorable guests, for joining us. My name is Kundwani Precious, and I'm presenting on behalf of the KUHI Consortium. The English rendering of that name is Empowerment Through Mobile Technology. And the Kinyarwanda rendering, which gives us the acronym from which KUHI comes from, will be seen on the projected slide. So you can see where the KUHI acronym is coming from. As already said, this is a consortium convened by GSMA, but made up of 4 organizations: ALIGHT, Give Directly, UNCDF, and World Vision International. Now let's go into our presentation. The government of Rwanda is moving towards a cashless economy and is aiming to achieve full socio-economic inclusion of refugees as part of a commitment to the comprehensive refugee response framework. Financial inclusion is highlighted as a key factor in achieving these aims. The FinScope 2020 report shows that there is progress towards more people being formally financially included. The number of banked people in Rwanda has increased from 26% in 2016 to 36% in 2020, and 75% of people access other formal or regulated but non-banked services. The proportion of financially excluded people continues to decrease. The decrease in people who are financially excluded is being driven by the uptake of formal financially regulated but non-banked services. For example, digital solutions, including mobile money, and the non-formal services used predominantly by refugees and host communities are informal savings groups. The KUHI Consortium commissioned a piece of research which firstly aimed to map the current digital financial inclusion landscape in the refugee camps and host communities. Secondly, we wanted to assess the readiness of these populations to adopt or expand their use of digital financial services. We thus conducted more than 1,700 interviews and 78 focus group discussions with key stakeholders. 69% of the people interviewed were female. I'll give an overview of some of the key findings and recommendations now, before we move on to a question and answer session. So please note down your questions or put them in the chat box, as it will be monitored for discussions by our expert panel afterwards. On the whole, mobile ownership is high. particularly in refugee populations where 93% of households report having access to a mobile phone. In host communities, the coverage is slightly lower at 78%, but still the majority of households have access to a phone. As phone access is fundamental for use of mobile money solutions, we find this very encouraging. Women report lower ownership of phones. In host communities, the percentage of females who own a phone is only 51%. This is something to bear in mind, given the capacity of mobile money to improve the economic lives of women. Network coverage across the country is good for both mobile network operators in Rwanda. On the whole, internet usage is around 23% in refugee camps. The core mobile money functions do not require internet or use of smartphone applications. Smartphone ownership is higher in refugee households and higher for males than for females. And most smartphone owners will access the internet at least a couple of times a week, if not daily. Both operators offer mobile money services and have services to pay, save, and in some cases, access microloans. Person-to-person transfers account for 60% of all mobile money services in refugee camps and 41% in host communities. For refugee households, most of the money transferred is from the cash transfer programs. Other potential digital financial options such as online banking, credit cards, payment through the Irembo portal were largely unknown. 42% of people living in camps are connected to an electricity supply. And in host communities, 55% of households are connected to electricity. Around 3/4 of those with electricity make payments via mobile money. At present, the most popular savings mechanism are informal savings groups. On average, around 40% of households are saving in this way. This is significantly more than the households currently saving with mobile money. For loans, it is similar. Despite saving groups having higher interest rates than some more formal loan facilities, almost all refugee households who have taken loans have done so through a savings group mechanism. No one in a host community or refugee household reported using mobile money to access a loan. At present, communities appear to prioritize the trust and lack of red tape, which seems to come with peer lending. There is potential to facilitate more uptake of additional digital financial services. Mobile network operators have developed products which allow savings and microcredit, and formal banks have also developed specific products. For example, those that are targeted at smallholder farmers. The view from respondents was that mobile money is safe and secure. They highlighted SIM swap arrangement for lost funds and money, and the password or PIN function. They also mentioned that when saving on a phone, there is no need to travel to deposit the money and no need to wait to save small amounts. Network outages were brought up as a concern, along with perceived high transaction charges and potential cybercrime or scams. Elderly people and those with lower literacy levels ask third parties to keep their passwords and do withdrawals, which indicates high trust but may present a risk. Only around 1 in 10 households reported having received training in financial services in host communities and refugee communities. We asked some basic mathematical questions to get an idea of financial literacy. While a majority of respondents could answer the basic addition questions correctly, less than 1 in 10 could calculate the interest earned on a savings account. This may provide an explanation as to why savings groups are favored despite their comparatively high interest rates. Livelihood options for refugee households remain limited, but highly gendered. For example, women use small capital investments from savings groups for petty trade, which fits around expected domestic duties. Men may engage more capital in intensive activities, for example, sale of soft drinks or beer. They may also travel outside the camp for work. Young people, mostly male, gravitate towards the digital economy, sale of airtime and operating mobile money kiosks, or working as Irembo agents in host communities. The quote in blue is from the Journal Science on the impact of M-Pesa, the first mobile money system in Kenya. It estimated that adoption of mobile money services reduced the number of people living in extreme poverty by as many as 195,000 households. In particular, M-Pesa has positively impacted the economic lives of women and female-headed households. There is evidence that increased digital financial inclusion can improve the lives of people who live on a very limited income. We can predict this will be enhanced by facilitating more livelihood opportunities. As 2020 has seen the impact of COVID-19 on livelihoods and economic opportunities, initiatives which promote easier management of existing financial resources may be beneficial to refugees and to host communities. The report indicates there are significant opportunities for development partners to facilitate increased uptake of digital financial services. As a consortium, we will now be undertaking a program design process which will incorporate some of these findings. We will thus engage with key stakeholders to build a portfolio of potential activities to contribute to the government of Rwanda's overall aim to include refugees in the economic and social life of Rwanda. We will be looking for inputs during this process from all of you as our key stakeholders. Through working as a consortium, we can ensure strong coverage, complementarity, and value for money for investing donors. We would now like to invite questions, comments, and inputs as we move into the Q&A session, which will be facilitated by Isaac Kwame of GSMA. Murakoze Chane, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kondwani. Maybe just before we move to Q&A session, we would also like to hear from Ms. Ingabire, the head of Strategic Program Implementation Unit with MINEMA, branch of the government of Rwanda. But Ms. Ingabire, if you could please come off mute and turn the video on and give so that we can hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. The UNHCR representative, development partners, humanitarian actors, all protocol observed. Good morning. First and foremost, I would like to welcome you and thank you for your participation in this webinar meant to launch the report on the digital financial inclusion in refugee settings and their host communities, and explore ways in which socioeconomic of refugees and host communities could be increased in line with the comprehensive refugee response framework on which the government of Rwanda is a signatory. Actually, Rwanda is a host of more than 140,000 refugees for over 2 decades since the first movement of Congolese refugees in 1996. By now, more than 80% of refugees are hosted in refugees camps and are living under humanitarian assistance. While the country continues to work with the international community to speak or to seek lasting solutions to problems of human displacement, the government of Rwanda recognizes solution to problem of recognizes the paramount importance to ensure refugees' inclusion in Rwanda society and being economic actors as a way of meeting their own needs. Livelihood opportunities are opened in refugee camps and surrounding areas, and some are based on core activities like agriculture production, retail, food trade, and trades based on hands-on skills such as carpentry, construction, tailoring, and hairdressing, and so forth. On the other hand, the cash-based transfers initiated by the UNHCR and the World Food Programme has increased cash flows within the camp economy. Also, saving groups based on the village saving and loan associations and work associations these groups form the basis of financial support in the camps and surrounding areas. The report we are launching today revealed that refugee and host communities have some weaknesses and lack of knowledge in micro-saving, business management, and have limited literacy as far as financial management is concerned. As a MINEMA and the government of Rwanda, we do agree with the recommendation of this study, specifically to diversify the livelihood of refugees through market-led skills, training in productive activities, to enhance financial capacities to save and thereafter to invest. Also to expand digitalization of village savings and loan groups, and to have all the benefit associated with these loan savings and loan groups. We also are recommending to intensify effort to increase financial knowledge beyond agents and aspiring entrepreneurs who may have little incentive to disseminate this knowledge. We are also recommending to advocate for creation of space for learning and coordination among all actors in financial, specifically this digital financial inclusion space to maximize the impact related on it. We are recommending to design programs which are sensitive to how which are sensitive to how digital financial inclusion impacts could reach the vulnerable groups. Finally, we are calling upon our partners and stakeholders engaged in promoting financial inclusion and the government of Rwanda as well to increase the level of coordination to avoid any sort of duplication and wastage of resources that may occur in the implementation process. There is a need also to scale up the integrated initiative with which support refugees and host communities to enter the labor market or engage in a business with a particular value chain, why not innovation, and support refugees to develop their new businesses opportunities in this in the appropriate sectors using this new platform of the digital financial inclusion. So without taking much of your time, once again, thank you for this initiative, for this study, and the recommendation made. So let us, all of us, see how we can speed up the implementation of the recommendations within this study. The government of Rwanda commits to use the effort that necessary to the successful implementation of the outcomes. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Ms. Ingabire. We'll be now proceeding into question and answer session. We have pre-planned set of questionnaires for our panelists who are coming to represent various sectors within the Rwanda development and humanitarian effort itself. We have representatives from MINEMA, from UNHCR, from EXAS, from UNCDF, and one from the GSMA refugee camp as well. We'll be calling all the way from there. And for those of you who would like to be have questions to ask, please do use the chat box in the questions. We're going to be going through them after the prepared questions have been already addressed. So, Ms. Ingabire, I'm going to start the first question with you. Before maybe you give an answer, I know you've introduced yourself already, but this will be for every single member of the panel. When I ask you a question, before you provide the answer, you introduce yourself and what you do and which organization you work for. So we'll start with you, Ms. Ingabire, again. How do you see the medium-term socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 for refugee and host community compare with the rest of Rwanda? How can we include the vulnerable in our effort toward socioeconomic inclusion for all refugees? Ms. Ingabire.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question. As introduction, my name is Veneranda Ingabire. I'm the head of SPIU in MINEMA. The SPIU is the single project implementation units. That units have the coordination of refugees, refugee camp management, livelihood, refugee and host community livelihood, and all other projects that are funded by external resources. So I have been in MINEMA since 2013. I have around 7 years of experience in MINEMA, specifically in this area of refugees and livelihood. So coming back to the question, the first question, I think I have two questions. Coming back to the first one, I'm seeing the short and medium impact of this COVID to refugees, and have to compare it to the rest of Rwandans. First of all, I think there is no difference between refugees and host communities because they all live in the same area. They are all exposed to the challenges related to the poverty and so on. Maybe the only difference is that ones are living in refugee camps because 80% of refugees are living in refugee camps. Some are receiving the support in humanitarian packages, if I can say. Others are outside the camp and are exploring the economic opportunities all around, specifically in some of the agriculture sector and the other primary economy all around the refugee camp. So what I can say right now is that we can't see really a huge difference between those both communities as far as COVID is concerned. So as you know, the COVID is a unique and severe health and economic crisis that is changing our lives, all of us. So it is a roaring combination of health pandemic and also with economic crisis. So most of economies, the sectors of economy, economic sectors and social sectors have been affected by this pandemic, starting from the primary sector to the tertiary sectors, and they are all levels. So the damages caused by the virus is enormous, and each effect can be just that they have enormous effects. Just to list one of the example on the human suffering. The human suffering, because the rapid loss of human life and the deterioration of health outcomes, and also economic suffering through some loss of jobs and other incomes. So as a small and medium enterprises are affected by the lockdowns, many workers have also lost their jobs and are working on reduced work schedules. As the starting point, I think those work schedules have been reduced by 50%, and now the new pace is that we are working at 30%, meaning that some of us have been somehow lost their potential to work, even though they are working remotely. So I think in the private sector, as they have to work at 30%, meaning that they are specifically lose their job and income related to the jobs they are used to do. So cash-strapped individuals and low-income earners are grouped in their home in this lockdown without any income for living. That is a fact. If the economy suffering is prolonged, I think we are expecting to have a huge a huge hurt to people, specifically the poor and vulnerable communities like refugees that are in camps, and the communities all around refugee camps. So the post-COVID recovery process will cost a lot. That is it. Experts said that aggressive investment and well-designed policy could bring the economy back more quickly and with less long-term distress for workers and businesses as well. They said also that countries can afford the investment in financial institutions. Here we are glad we are launching this digital financial inclusion, because they're saying that if we can increase the level of which the financial institutions are lending their loans to the medium and small economies, that could boost the economy. So as a matter of facts, let us have the example of the country here in Rwanda, where we have to see how we will have to work on the domestic policy to promote local made product like made in Rwanda, with the option to supply or to have what to supply on the local market with product by increasing jobs and reducing the pressure to demand for foreign currencies for import. That could be one option. So right now the government have to do all they can to limit the health, economic, financial, and corporate distress, and at macro level, but also at micro level, they have to see how they have to boost the economy after this pandemic, of course. So coming back to the population of concern, I mean refugees and host communities, and the second question you are asking, how can we include vulnerable in our efforts towards socio-economic inclusion of refugees? So actually, we are implementing the livelihood strategy. It is a strategy for government of Rwanda that we are implementing with other implementing partners and humanitarian actors to see how refugees can contribute to the economy of the host country, here I mean Rwanda, and also see how they can work and meet their own needs, if I can say. So opportunities are here and there. Just I can list some of examples. Livelihood opportunities are opened in refugee camps and surrounding areas, and such as based in the agriculture production, in retail, food trade, hands-on skills and trade-related on it. So the opportunities are there, and the government is working on creating other opportunities, like putting in place some infrastructures just to link the working opportunities with the refugees that are based in remote areas. So the government of Rwanda, with the support from the World Bank and the other development actors, we are working on how, and we're trying to see how to put in place those infrastructures like roads, just to link those working opportunities and so forth. And also we are working on the capacity building aspect or sector, where we are putting in place some schools, infrastructures, health infrastructures, to see how we can deal with this social sector and capacitate refugees and host communities to have the necessary skills and knowledge to enter the labor market, and therefore work for the development of the host country and their economies as well. So what can we do right now after this COVID so that the vulnerable group are included in socioeconomic activities of the country? So here I just want to come back to one of the recommendations from the study we're launching today, just to diversify the livelihood of refugees through market-ready skills, trainings, and productive activities to enhance their financial capacities to save and let alone to invest. And of course, we have to explore all opportunities that are in the government of Rwanda commitment to the CRRF. Just a matter of example, related to the strategy for socioeconomic inclusion, recently the government of Rwanda made additional commitments in relation with livelihood of refugees and host communities, and that one was to promote joint agriculture projects between refugees and host communities household, and expand tea plantation and improve necessary infrastructures that increase job opportunities for refugee and host communities, and promote refugee youth empowerment through Youth Connect and other initiatives aiming at socioeconomic transformation of youth, refugees, and host communities as well. So I think opportunities are many. They are here and there, and the government of Rwanda is supporting the initiatives to see how refugees and host communities can work. So I think after this pandemic, we have a lot of opportunities to explore, so that the refugees and host communities can be self-reliant. So without taking much of your attention, I think those are what I have to elaborate. So I'm waiting for further questions and clarification. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for that very detailed answer. That's very helpful. Our next question goes to UNHCR, who's on the panel being represented by Arifur. So Arifur, if you could just introduce yourself before you provide your answer, that would be great. And the question is, financial inclusion is one important element to achieving socioeconomic inclusion. But as we know, it is not the only element. How can we combine efforts to increase access to financial services digitally with other programs to support self-reliance? What are the priority areas for complementary interventions? Arifur, brief intro and then answer, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Isaac Kahumi, and distinguished guest speakers, representative from UNHCR, MINEMA, donor partners, NGOs, and of course the KUHI Consortium and other members. My name is Arifur Rahman. I'm Head of Livelihoods and Economic Inclusion Unit at UNHCR Rwanda. I think the question is about how financial inclusion is one of the critical pillars of broader economic inclusion and livelihoods, and what are the complementarity that may be required to achieve the sustainable develop livelihoods. I think that premise is quite self-explanatory in a way that is, and I support it fully. Financial inclusion is one of the pillars, and it is necessary element, but it may not achieve the sustainable self-reliance opportunities and the goals unless it is supplemented with a number of other economic and opportunities, other support, including policy support. So this is not sufficient. That is my main answer to that question. Now, if you allow me, I could actually share a small screen for a diagram that could possibly better explain this premise. Can you see it?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so yeah. So this is actually a broader system of like inclusive market system, which we use in UNHCR for improving financial inclusion and economic inclusion. As from our government colleague, MINEMA Rwanda mentioned that we have a joint livelihoods and economic inclusion strategy with the government, and it has this financial inclusion component inbuilt along with some other component. And let me just go through this diagram that shows about that how livelihoods have these, like financial capital is one of the areas, but you have also the human capital, the issue of physical capital, social capital, and natural capital. But you know, the challenges are there, and that's why when we deal with the financial inclusion, we have to also deal with some of the aspects through the programming, through the interventions. So that are the supplementary aspects. Some are actually very critical, even if the study shows that in some context, this only financial inclusion within the low-income group may have huge impact, but for the longer term, I think it should interplay with all other aspects. For example, like right to work, the mobility aspect, the policy issues, the access to assets and financial resources, and as well as like access to infrastructure like electricity or road. All of them have actually, even human development, like the study rightly mentioned about the financial literacy. We also think that business development advisory services as a kind of coaching and mentoring to the most vulnerable population who has limited access, limited knowledge, limited skills. So they need a bit of like coaching and mentoring, how to kind of move towards the graduation out of humanitarian assistance. Particularly when we talk about digital financial services, you need a kind of coaching and support services around. This also include, for example, if we go into the rules and regulation side of the donut, you see on the down that the local rules, local laws, for example, in case of digital financial services, the know your customer documentation in the case of refugees, we often have problems when they don't have an ID. If an ID is there, most of refugees have, based on verification exercise UNHCR did with the government, but still some people, some refugees, they don't have, and they have proof of registration document. And according to the law, proof of registration document is generally not always accepted by all financial service providers as the know your customer document, know your customer. So we have to also work on that what are the laws. Government has also very helpful, and at least the Equity Bank, who has our main partner on transferring a humanitarian cash transfer for WFP and also UNHCR, they are allowing to some extent this POR document. But ultimately, I agree with the study findings that we would like to go for this digital financial services, and for that you really need those smart methodologies, including documentation for all. So I'm just giving you some example that how also rules and regulation are important. So if we have a design of a financial inclusion programming, you have to also work with the local rules and regulation and subject to the context. So in Rwanda, government is very generous that provide favorable protection environment, including right to work and some extent of mobility. If you get authorization for livelihoods and other purposes, they're generally free to move. But for longer term, they may need a bit of still permission. So what we are trying to say that you have to work in this context. In many countries, even refugees are not even allowed to work outside or stay outside of the camp. So those are very important. You have a small market within the refugee camp. Sometimes you might have to grow the business or linking with the host community, because evidence show that, even this study, that how the local economy is interrelated with the host community. And if that is facilitated further through our programming, that actually give you a higher multiplier effect on the local economy, to the growth, to the trade, to the businesses, and ultimately it creates a win-win situation for both host and refugee community, and ultimately reducing the pressure on the government, UNHCR, and donor community for managing the humanitarian aspects of refugee cases in any country, including Rwanda. If you see the interventions on the upper side of the donut, that the services, as I mentioned, include finance as one of them, but also the information, the infrastructure, as I mentioned, technology, which is now going with finance, it also comes with like access to energy, like electricity. So these are the kind of part of the system when we call about an inclusive market system. And outcome-wise, you see, if you have all the things are addressed, then you could get a better outcome in the areas of protection, jobs, incomes, livelihoods, participation, resilience. So this is like in a nutshell that how a program can actually, even if you keep the financial inclusion component in the middle, you have to have a linkage either directly or indirectly, either through that partnership or a kind of a different kind of way of partnership with others. For example, this World Bank Ziambere project is supporting government of Rwanda, and we are working with them together. It has a component of financial inclusion. There was one question in the sideline that what else, what other banking services and financial services are currently available. As you see, like for the last few years, a number of partners have started working. The World Bank project is starting now. It is a bit affected due to COVID-19 delays, but the Development Bank of Rwanda, MINEMA can possibly also shed some light on that, are working with a number of FSPs, financial sector partners and providers, to provide loans. We have also several other partners working there and doing some training on financial literacy. But I agree with the findings that there is a gender dimension which needs to be addressed, that possibly, but more and more we are actually targeting the women in the household, so that they are part of this gender inequality in livelihoods programming or access to financial services or even digital phones, and that is minimized. I also liked that point on the youth, the study findings, that many youth actually are more proactive, more linked with the digital financial services, internet. So I think in the, as per target group, they are one of the kind of, I would say, very high potential target group to uptake these financial services, particularly the digital. So I think, this is in a nutshell that how a coordination, as the report also said, is important among the partners, but also across the sectors, because livelihoods is itself, as you see in the model, is not just only financial. Livelihoods encompasses, particularly when you talk about a longer term resilience among the refugees, and they no longer require humanitarian assistance. You have to tackle the multiple vulnerabilities. So for example, if you have a bank account and you have access to even saving a loan, what does it mean to a refugee if you don't have, like, don't have not only just financial literacy, but also not the minimum income or cash or expenditure that would support your businesses, or you don't have access to electricity or access to even other services, then the results would be limited. So that is, I think, that complementarity that everyone, and I request all the partners that we are here if you are thinking about anything in the future, we'd be able to share further light on this, how the complementarity may work. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Arif. That's very helpful. We are slightly pressed on time, so for the rest of the panel, member of the panel here, I'll ask you to please be as brief as you can with your answers. And for the questions that are coming through the chat box, if we don't have enough time to address all of them, the answers will be sent to you via email as part of the webinar reporting circulation, plus also the recording of the webinar, and part of that will also be answered to the questions that you've raised here. Some great questions are coming through as well. So our next question goes to Shima Steve, who works for Access. Steve, you'll introduce yourselves briefly before giving your answer. And the question is, the SAVE platform, the one that your company had put together, is an example of digitizing proven savings methodology. What have been the key successes and challenges of this model? How can we work with regulators and mobile network operators to ensure an attractive product, in particular for user fees, which is an issue raised by the group of participants, including those that we serve in the refugee camps? Steve.
Thank you very much for having me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on this panel. I'm called Shema Steve, and I'm a CEO of Exus, which is a fintech company based in Kigali, Rwanda. A bit about myself. So I've been working with savings groups since 2015. We were involved in the first countrywide survey on savings groups. That sort of shed more light, at least as far as cross-sector, multi-sector perspective, because previously savings groups were pretty much known by the development sector NGOs. But after some of the findings, because we've done it a number of years since 2014, the latest is 2018. Now we've seen interest from different players, mainly private sector and the regulator. So they've all come in to sort of try to have a good understanding of how these savings groups, are sort of impacting, people's lives, especially within the rural area, as well as, at least trying to increase financial inclusion. Now, back to the question, I think it's been an interesting journey. We've been learning, we're still learning a lot, but some of the most few success story that I can share here is to do with what we've seen, at least recently, because we've been doing this. We started the first pilot in 2016 with World Vision and Care International. We did only about 25 groups. Now we have over 2,000 groups that we are working with. That's roughly 36,000+ people. And so just to share with you a few numbers, early this year, before COVID, we had a huge challenge regarding mindsets, at least for these people to use digital channels, because they're used to using cash, handling cash, to see it, putting it in the box. So using digital channels, at least from a mindset perspective, was a bit challenging, because they would ask, where is our money? Who has our money? And so there was a whole challenging, aspect on that level. And COVID, however much it's an unfortunate experience, but it sort of really assisted in that regard, because we saw number going through the roof. At least back in February, we had about over $200 to $300 in savings, despite the fact we had thousands of users on the platform. But currently, as of last month, we were averaging about more than $13,000 in monthly savings, and we're seeing people now embracing it, and the digital channels. And that's one of the success story with the help of our partners, obviously. So now people within rural areas, they're sort of now more understanding in terms of, the digitalization, and it's really helping them to run their operations. They have, some of them have even expressed the benefits of using digital channel, especially when it comes to transparency and security of their funds. So, and obviously convenience, which is something that has helped them quite a lot. Now, in terms of challenges, obviously there's still challenges that we need to face as we move towards. Now, from the savings groups bit, the main challenge has been obviously the charges, and so we tried with the help of the telcos to sort of slash down the cost, because wallet to wallet transfer, the fee is free. The only charges that apply is when they're cashing out. So that's one that has been a concern to the users, saying that it's really costly to them. Now, when thinking of sustainability, so we realized that it wouldn't be sustainable to remove those fees. Rather, our argument has always been, how do we create more value for these groups so that they still pay the cash out fees, but still make interest. So this has been an equation we've been working with, and with the support of the private sector that are coming in to sort of, because initially we are only linked with telcos. Now we're trying to integrate with, we're integrating with the banks that will be offering interest on deposits and also extending credit to these groups. So this would add more value to their savings, to the point that they won't really feel any harm paying cash out fees, because they have to understand telcos have to make money, and it has to be a sustainable model. Now, on the regulator side, so I'm very appreciative of the Rwanda Central Bank. So they've been engaging us on multiple occasions, trying to understand the structure or how this sector operates. And one key takeaway was that instead of formalizing such informal groups, there should be efforts to formalize the channels through which they distribute money. Because by formalizing the group as entities, that would sort of affect their social contrast and their flexibility, as opposed to formalize the channel. So this is the conversation that's still ongoing, but so far the central bank is sort of understanding, and now, since I think last year, they put up a department that's really focusing on financial inclusion and stability. So they're trying to sort of have a good understanding of the sector in order to know how they can support in one way or the other. And lastly, there's a concept, again, back to some of the things that were mentioned before, is how do we now, moving forward, how do we, given COVID-19 and any other challenges that are surrounding savings groups digitalization. So, I mean, we've seen that for this process to be successful, there has to be, partnerships, from the development sector, fintech, the governments, that means, the regulator or other government agencies. So there has to be a partnership around it. And these can only happen if people come together and understand the structure, as opposed to sort of, applying some things that have worked in other sectors to savings groups, because they have a very special, I would say special way they operate in, which requires somebody to first understand, to be able to sort of intervene in one way or the other. So that whole sort of partnership would be really key to sort of push this thing to the next level, but also creating sustainability around it, because the private sector alone can't, the development sector alone can't, the government alone can't, so there has to be a partnership around it. So, I think I tried to answer some of the questions, and if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to respond to those. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. For the sake of time, we're going to move to our next panelist, and this is Eric Tuhimbaze, who's calling in from the Gihembe refugee camp. He's a person of concern. He's going to answer the question in Kinyarwanda, but we have a translator with him who will give a brief translation in English after he's spoken. So Eric, the question to you is, what opportunity has working in the digital economy given you? How important is mobile phone access for refugees in the camp? How did the code of conduct and humanitarian code of conduct and protection training that you were part of last year, when GSMA, ALIGHT, and MTN partnered to conduct this training in Rwanda, helped you to best work with vulnerable communities and customers? Eric?
Murakoze.
Thank you very much.
Amazina yanjye nitwa Tuhimbaze Eric.
My name is Tuhimbaze Eric.
Nkaba ndi umucuruzi wa mobile money n'amayinite mu nkambi ya Gihembe.
I'm a businessman in this digital using mobile money and meet you.
Nkaba mfite imyaka 25 ndacyari urubyiruko.
I have 25 years old. I'm still young.
Nishimiye kuba natumiwe muri iyi nama. Murakoze.
I'm happy to join this webinar meeting. Thank you. The first question.
Cyambere kirabaza.
Amahirwe mu gukoresha ikoranabuhanga wabonye ni nayahe?
Nabonye amahirwe menshi cyane.
So there are so many opportunities that I've got.
Cyambere namenyanye n'abantu aribo bafatanya abakiriya banje benshi.
First of all, I have been linked with so many people in the camp which are my clients.
Icya kabiri nungutse ubumenyi bwinshi ku ikoranabuhanga kuri telefone.
The second one, I have got skills and knowledge on the use of this digital mobile.
Abandi benshi urundi rubyiruko wenda rutabikora cyangwa rutabigezemo rudafite.
That so many young boys and girls did not get in the refugee camp.
Icya gatatu nabashe no kunguka amafaranga.
The third one is just getting benefits and seeing growing my business.
Icya kabiri cyabazwa.
So icya kabiri ibyiza byo gukoresha telefone.
Hari ibyiza byinshi byo gukoresha telefone ni byinshi cyane.
So there are so many important to use mobile phones.
Icya mbere n'umutekano w'amafaranga wawe.
First of all, the security of the money in your mobile phone.
Icya kabiri nukuba utagendana amafaranga mu ntoki cyangwa se mu mufuka.
The second was just not going with your money in your pocket.
Hari byinshi cyane nabonye byiza byo gukoresha telefone, kudatakaza umwanya wawe wenda giye gushaka service.
Not losing your time when you are seeking services.
Murakoze cya gatatu nikihe?
Amahugurwa wahawe na ALIGHT ndetse na MTN ari kwihohoterwa ndetse na
amahugurwa nahawe na ALC na MTN nayo nabonye ari meza kandi ari menshi.
The trainings that I received from ALC currently ALIGHT and MTN was very important to me.
Duhereye kuri ALIGHT yatwigishije uburyo ki umuntu atakoresha ububasha afite akora ubushukanyi se cyangwa se ahohotera abantu.
Starting by ALIGHT, I have been receiving SGBV training whereby you can just use your power by just doing sexual violence.
Batwigishije amategeko n'ibihano bigenewe wenda wakoze wahohoteye umuntu.
They have even been taught about code of conduct and then laws when you do sexual gender-based violence.
Kuri MTN yo batwigisha uburyo ki wafata neza abakiriya bawe.
So for MTN, I have been just trained about customer care for your clients.
Murakoze cyane.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. That's really helpful to hear that how mobile access to mobile phone is really enabling refugees to have access to financial inclusion as well as digital inclusion, and how the code of conduct training has helped you to be able to service a vulnerable community with respect that they deserve. Our last panel question goes to UNCDF, Rosalind, and I would ask you if you can please be as brief as you can with the answer so we can try to not to push the time too far. And the question is, how can we further open up digital economy during COVID to support refugees and mitigate the impact of the current necessary restrictions? Are the financial institution and users ready? Are regulation to ensure safety for users in place? How can we expand the uptake? Rosalind?
Thank you, Isaac. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'll try to be brief. though the question is quite long. My name is Roslyn Wamahoro. I'm the current program coordinator of UNCDF Rwanda, and I have almost 14 years of experience in the financial sector, with almost 9 specifically in the financial inclusion, where I have worked for a development agency, where I've worked for a commercial bank, a capital market. Now I'm here at UNCDF. So thank you for the question, and thank you for all the people attending the webinar. So to be able to answer to this question, I think we will have to look at the whole ecosystem, and thanks to the previous panelists, because I think they have addressed most of the issues on these questions, because the whole ecosystem requires to look at how each and every part of the sector is working towards it. And this is what UNCDF, the 5-year strategy of UNCDF, of leaving no one behind in the digital era, is looking at, whereby we are looking at how to facilitate and address the enabling policy and regulation. And I think that's what MINEMA and UNHCR addressed in terms of what are the rules, policies that are in place. And that's what even Shema of EXA said, that thanks to the central bank, now they have started discussion, which is really one of the key components that one has to look at. The other one is an open digital payment ecosystem, whereby facilitating the interoperability between the various players. And thanks to this, to the testimony we've just heard from Eric, you hear that MTN has already started to work with other institutions like ALIGHT, which is very key when you are looking at how do we address the effect of COVID, how do we facilitate the digital financial inclusion of refugees, but also the host communities. So it's very key to have an open digital payment ecosystem, whereby the different players on the market, being the MNOs, the fintechs, the banks are talking to each other so that we are addressing these issues. The third component that our UNCDF strategy looks at, and that I think answers this question, is also looking at the innovation component, whereby we come up with various digital solutions. If you take part of what Shema Exas is doing in the camps, in partnership with Inhomoko, in partnership with World Vision, of looking for ways to digitize the operations of savings group, it's one of the digital solutions that can be fronted above. And also looking at some of our partners, thanks to UNHCR, they say that they've been working with Equity Rwanda, and even UNCDF is working with Equity Bank as an example to look for a way to facilitate opening up of digital account, to facilitate refugees to not move far from their camps, but to be able to open their account within the refugees and start transacting from there. So that's another part that addresses the question you are addressing me in terms of are financial institutions ready? Yes, I'll say yes. Some of them are ready and some of them are working on that space. If you look at equity, if you look at microfinances like Omutanguha, who have gone ahead and partnered with not only us, but other development agencies to look for ways to support the financial inclusion of refugees, but also the digital financial inclusion of refugees. And I'll say the last part for this, to be brief, is to empowering the potential beneficiaries. In terms of empowering, we've heard that there's still a challenge in terms of mindset. That's what Shema Exas talked about in terms of how do they now start using the available digital solutions or digital products that we are taking to them. It's good. The Veneranda of MINEMA talked about the way the government is addressing the part of infrastructure, is addressing the part of interoperability. But now us, as the players on the market, we have to look at how we can facilitate these beneficiaries to have enough digital training on how to use digital solutions in financial education. And on this, I would like to emphasize that we are happy as UNCDF that we came up with a digital financial education app that is going to be widely used in all the camps to facilitate the refugees, but also to the host communities in terms of learning how to manage your budget, how to start your businesses, which financial institution to go to, what are the interest rates, because if you recall in the presentation that Kondwani made, only less than 1% of the beneficiaries that were interviewed could answer about interest rate. And only 1 out of 10 of the people that were interviewed received training in financial education. So we believe that with this financial education app, we'll be able to reach out to so many beneficiaries in the refugees, but also in the camps, so that they receive this training. And I think that's one of the key components, but not only for UNCDF, but also for our consortium to look at on how to empower the beneficiaries to use the different digital services and different digital solutions that are being provided on the market, so that they can also embrace them and have a bigger exposure. So in a nutshell, that will be my answer to your question. Thank you.
Great, many thanks, Rosalind. That's extremely helpful. Now, as we approaching closure of this webinar session, a question we might be all of us asking ourselves is, so what's next? Where do we go from here? The report has been published, the presentation has been done, the report is being launched, then what's next? So without further ado, I'm gonna bring in our partner, Bernard, who's the country director for ALIGHT Rwanda, to come and provide the closure word, as well as try to go through what's going to be the next steps for the KUHI Consortium. Bernard?
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you all participants. It's been a great conversation. It would be hard to attempt to summarize each piece, but just some of the few things that have come up. The Rwanda government's commitment and support to displaced persons in Rwanda is a big piece that has come out of this conversation and is much appreciated. The integration of hosts and refugees as we look into this. We've also listened to conversations around coordination so that there are no duplication, looking at integrated packages and approach, as UNHCR, a technical lead, did show us and share with us. The critical need for alignment, as well as looking at context-specific interventions, has been part of our conversation today. Diversifying opportunities for savings, as well and leading into investment. The mindset piece to this, as ably brought out by Steve of Exus. And then we've also shared or heard about the need for specific value chain enabling and targeted programming, and not forgetting also market-led skills diversification. So really, it's been a rich 1 hour plus conversation, and I want to really thank our panelists and our key guest speakers who kicked off the session today. In terms of next steps, as we close this, we will be sharing a copy of this report via email to each of our participants. Dear participants, we thank you again. We'll also have that report uploaded on the websites of our respective KUHI Consortium members. So in case the email doesn't come through, you know where to visit and find it. And very, very important, we'll be engaging you, as Sean, my colleague, did mention much earlier, as we look to co-design a program, not design a program led by the consortium members only, but involving you as critical stakeholders that look and address the findings and recommendations of this assessment report. We will also be, more immediately, we'll also be looking at engaging on how potential activities can promote quicker recovery as we deal with the pandemic at this particular moment. And we're looking to move fairly fast. We are hoping that we should have a robust program concept note somewhere by November of this calendar year. And importantly, we also commit to keep each of you updated as we accomplish those next steps that I've just outlined. Last but not least, to sincerely thank MINEMA represented by Veneranda today, who is the national head for SPIU at MINEMA. Thank you very, very much for the support and the continued facilitation from MINEMA. I want to really thank Honorable UNHCR Representative Baba Fall, who has always remained supportive of efforts and actually leads the coordination of refugee response support and services in Rwanda. Thank you very, very much for your time, thoughts, questions. Also, not forget our panelists today for doing a great job. I know there would have been a lot more to learn and share from you if time allowed us, but trust that what the bit you shared is already a lot insightful and useful as we look at the next steps on this. All said, therefore, on behalf of the consortium, really to thank each and every one of you and to look forward to the next steps with very, very close and ongoing engagement. Over to you, Isaac or Sean, in case of any final words.
Thank you, Bernard. Shen, I think we've come to an end now. Are you okay to close or should I close?
Yes.
Please. Go ahead. Feel free.
Great. Thank you all. This is it. You're going to receive the report via email, as Bernard did share just now. And also all the questions that were raised in the chat box that we did not get the time to go through them, those answers will be also sent to you via an email. Please stay tuned to receive those emails from either myself or Anna or Shen or Bernard. One of us will be getting back to you with the answers. Thank you very much and have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, friends.
Thank you very much, everyone.